2, 1, 2, 3.
Hi there folks, and welcome to Get Strumming. Now today I'm going to do something a little bit different, and this is geared to all you Beatles fans out there. Basically what I've done is picked out 20 either singles, EPs, LPs or CDs, and they're not my favourite recordings, but they've just got some kind of personal resonance with me that goes back to my even early childhood. But these are the originals that either I bought or my mother bought years ago when they first came out. So without further ado, let's have a look at the first record. Ta-da, here it is. Now this is Twist and Shout. This is an EP, or otherwise known as an extended player. And an EP, for those who don't know, was basically a cross between a single and an LP, which is long player. And you'd play this at 45 RPM, which is the same as a single, but it contained extra tracks. So here we've got Twist and Shout, A Taste of Honey, Do You Want to Know a Secret, and There's a Place, which were all released on the Please Please Me LP. Now, the reason that I remember this is because it was my first introduction to the Beatles. I remember opening the sideboard drawer at my mother's house and just seeing these four guys jumping in the air, maybe on a Liverpool bomb site, with a cool Beatle boots. They've got the short Beatle haircuts, the early Beatle haircuts. And I just thought they looked just cool. They just looked the bee's knees. And I said to my mum, can you put this on the record player? Which she did. And when I first heard Twist and Shout, that was it. It was game over. I fell in love with the Beatles. Just this sheer raucous sound of John and the other two answering him. I always thought, in my 4-year-old mind, I was thinking, why are they taking the mick out of John? Because he was going, well, shaking a baby now. And they're going, shaking a baby. It's like they were kind of goading him or teasing him. And that's what was going on in my 4-year-old head. And I was thinking, Paul and George, leave John alone. And then it wasn't till years later that I realised that this was a standard feature, particularly of 60s music, where you'd have a phrase and then the other two guys would kind of repeat that phrase. So it's a call and answer kind of thing. But I thought that Paul and George were taking the mick out of John. But anyway, so here you go. So this is Twist and Shout. This is the original EP that my mother bought in 1963. And as you can see, I'll just hold it up there. It's well worn, well scratched. Probably wouldn't fetch that much if you saw it in a shop nowadays, because it's not mint condition, but it means the world to me because this was my introduction to the Beatles. Next record. This is Nobody Told Me by John Lennon, and it was released posthumously in 1984, and it was also featured on the Milk and Honey album. I've got real fond memories of this. I'll have been about 6 years old when I heard this, and I really wanted a copy of it. It's one of the first times that I actually asked, I think it was my grandmother, if she could buy it for me, because I was only 6. And I remember being in Blackpool at John Lewis's store in 1984. Now Blackpool, for anybody who's overseas might not know where Blackpool is, Blackpool's just a little bit further up the west coast of England to Liverpool. So I was over there with my grandparents, and I said to my grandmother, there's a song that John Lennon's brought out. Nobody said to me, or no, but I couldn't get the title right. Anyway, she went up to the counter and then came back with this, and it was just such a warm memory of my grandmother, who was one of the kindest people on the planet. And I just love this song. I don't know, just Lennon's voice and just the happy-go-lucky nature of the song, and wonderful memories. And also what I couldn't quite understand was, in my young head, I understood it, but I couldn't quite compute the fact that John was no longer with us. So he'd been killed 3 years earlier. And to hear the guy's voice on the radio, it was kind of a weird concept for my 6-year-old brain to take in. But there you go. So this is Nobody Told Me, and Oh Sanity was the B-side by Yoko. So there you go, a lovely little single and a lovely picture of them both, probably taken in 1980 in New York. Next record. Well, this is a blinder. I'll love this one. Not, you know, it's divisive among a lot of people, but this is Paul McCartney and the Frog Chorus. Now, you've got to remember, I was born in 1977, a month after Elvis died. So I'm just sort of putting myself into the historical context, if you like. So when this came out, again, I think this was, 1984. So you can see, I'd obviously, 84, when I was about 6 years old, is when I really started to listen to music. And obviously, I was familiar with the Beatles, so when I heard Paul McCartney's voice, and also couple that with the fact that it was a cartoon, if I'm right, I think it was featured just before Return of the Jedi in cinemas. The cartoon short that they brought out. I think it was like a trailer just before the Return of the Jedi movie. So obviously I'd have probably seen it there in the cinema. And I mean, for anybody that hasn't seen it, I know Paul McCartney gets a lot of stick for it because it's basically a kid's song, and it's, you know, he was known for doing songs like Helter Skelter and Hey Jude, and then why has he brought out this? Well, probably because he had kids and he was writing, you know, what he knew about, you know, and kids love these kind of nursery rhyme cartoon songs, so he thought, right, I'll write one. And when I heard it on the radio actually a couple of months ago, and I thought, man, this really is one hell of a song, because there's, you know, the key changes within it. George Martin's score itself is just a triumph. So I love this song, and again, I remember getting this when I was probably about 6 or maybe 7, and I love the cartoon as well. So We All Stand Together by Paul McCartney and the Finchley Frogettes. There we go. No More Lonely Nights, again released in 1984. Now, I never actually got to see the Broad Street film at the time. I don't think I saw it till 1990 when it came on TV. Now, I'm one of the few people who actually really like the film. I mean, all right, it's not the best film on the planet, but it's got some beautiful sequences in there, including the Eleanor Rigby sequence, to name but one. And yeah, this song I remember seeing on, maybe it was Saturday Superstore, which was basically like a British program for kids on a Saturday morning. And so Paul McCartney still had kudos with the younger generation at the time. He was still being featured on kids' shows, albeit he was old enough to be most kids' dads by then, because he'll have been in his early 40s. But again, I just think this song, I've got to say, it's one of the best singles he's ever brought out, to be honest. You know, the song itself is gorgeous, and the guitar solo by David Gilmour at the end. I mean, what a combination, McCartney and Gilmour. So again, got really fond memories of this. I think as well, I've also got fond memories about this song because it may have been in the charts when I used to go and visit my dad when he lived in London. And because Broad Street was set in London and it had this kind of picture of a London train station, I don't know, maybe that had some kind of happy emotional link in my head. But the song, to be honest, in my eyes, this is one of McCartney's best solo songs without a shadow of a doubt. No More Lonely Nights, released in 1984. Okay then, now we're going to look at a couple of Beatles singles. Now these are normal singles, these are flexi discs, and the Beatles brought out Christmas flexi discs every year from 1963 right up to 1969, and they were all only issued to Beatles fans, so you had to be a member of the Beatles fan club to actually obtain one of these. Now when I got to about 12, 13, 14, maybe probably around 13, I started a paper round. Now, I know a lot of kids, when they start a paper round, they'll go and collect the, baseball cards or whatever, or sticker album stuff, or you name it. I got into collecting Beatles records, and I had to save up a hell of a lot to get this one for a 13-year-old, because this was £30, and I think I bought it in maybe 1990 or 1991 from a record shop in Huddersfield, where I live, in West Yorkshire, and it was called Dead Wax Records. And sadly, I think the shop burnt down, but it was in Byram Arcade in Huddersfield. So any Huddersfieldians out there will remember Dead Wax Records with, I think the guy was Morgan Crook, his name was, and anything he didn't know about vinyl wasn't worth knowing. So this is the Beatles, another Beatles Christmas record. So this was the second one they brought out, and it was issued in December 1964. Now, round about this time, they would simply just get round a microphone, just act daft and tell jokes. Later on, they got a little bit more comprehensive. I'll just get this out now. So as you can see, floppy disk. So I'll just hold that up there for you to see. There we go. So obviously with some of these vinyls, I tend to keep them in plastic sleeves just to protect them a wee bit. So yes, so this is the official Beatles fan club disc 1964. I'll just show you the reverse as well. There's a little, one or two scuff marks, so again, not mint condition, but not bad. And as I say, I paid 30 quid for it back in 1991. Whether or not I was ripped off, I've no idea, but to be honest, I think it's 30 quid well spent. And I love listening to these. They're really good fun. I really recommend the Beatles flexi disc. In fact, actually, if you look on my channel on Get Strumming, just last Christmas I put together a tutorial on how to play a couple of songs from a couple of the Beatles flexi discs. Now this is another one. This is from Christmas '68, and you can kind of tell the difference with the later Beatles flexi discs, simply because they were no longer working together as a unit. So they were no longer working in the studio together, putting together plays or little songs. They all recorded their bits separately, as they did on this. Now, if I remember rightly, you'll also hear George Harrison with Tiny Tim and his ukulele, you see, so there's the ukulele link, where I believe Tiny Tim plays Nowhere Man. He's a real nowhere man, with his high voice. And so yeah, this is good fun as well, and great cover. Really, you can tell now we're into the psychedelia. You can see the difference between the early 60s and the late 60s. You've got them all with the suits on, looking all smart in the early 60s. Then we're into the psychedelic era of 1968, just here, yeah. So a couple of my favourite Beatles singles, the Christmas flexi disc, and who knows, one day I might actually purchase the rest. Okay, this is my next record. Now I'm going on to LPs now, albums. Now, as you can tell, this was a bootleg. Now, bootlegs, for those who don't know, are kind of unofficial releases, which contains material, maybe outtakes or live versions or different takes, where the artists have just put them in the vaults and left them to gather dust, and somebody's picked them out of the vaults, said, "Oh, we'll make a bob or two on this." In fact, since the Beatles brought out the anthology back in the mid-1990s, a lot of the tracks that are featured on a lot of bootlegs have been found their way onto official Beatles recordings. However, just looking at this one in particular, there are still one or two tracks that I've never seen anywhere else. There's One After 909, the studio rehearsal. Now there is a version of it on the anthology, but I don't think it's the one on here, and it's a 1960, it says 1962 one after 909. Then we've got an instrumental called Cat's Walk, which is an embryonic version of Cat Call, which I think might have been released on Anthology 1. There's also the original demo that John Lennon recorded of Bad to Me, which eventually Billy J. Kramer recorded. There's Do You Want to Know a Secret remixed, Leave My Kitten Alone. First time I ever heard Leave My Kitten Alone was on this record, and that obviously found its way onto the anthology. If You Got Trouble, the Ringo song, if you got trouble and you've got less trouble than me. So again, first time I heard that song was on this record. Then we've got the Around the Beatles TV special recording of Shout, the Lulu hit. What have we got here on side 2? Yes It Is, first time released in stereo. Paperback Writer, remix, No Echo. You Mother Should Know, original demo. I think that was on Anthology 2. Goodbye, that Paul recorded for Mary Hopkin. So this Paul's original version of Goodbye. Again, first time I ever heard it. You can see what a delight it was for me as a young Beatles fan, way back in the early 1990s, pre-anthology, to find all this sort of gold dust on these bootleg albums. We've got I've Got a Feeling, alternate take from the Get Back sessions, I'm in Mine, and A Day in the Life with a clean intro with the countdown, again to be featured on the anthology. But yeah, I loved this album, and it was again £10 for all these rare Beatles songs. You can't knock it, and obviously you've got to play on the Beatles for sale, Beatles not for sale. Okay, next up, the next vinyl that really means a lot to me is this one. Now, I didn't only just look out for Beatles songs, but I was also really interested in Beatle interviews. Now, today, in the days of YouTube, just practically every Beatles interview you'll ever want to find will be up there in some shape or form. But back in the 80s and early 90s, these interviews were really hard to come by, unless you happen to stumble upon an LP like this. Now, this particular album contains side 1, Newscast and Interview, February 1966, regarding John Lennon's statement in Datebook magazine that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus Christ. Now, I'm sure that I've seen in an interview with Noel Gallagher that when Noel Gallagher, of Oasis fame, obviously, went to Sifter's Records in Didsbury, that he actually purchased, might have been this same one, and I know Mr. Sifter at the record shop said to him, you know, you're going to have to be careful there, lad, because if you get big, we'll just watch what you say, because John Lennon went to serious trouble over his remarks about Christianity and the Beatles being bigger than Jesus. So this was the first time that I'd heard that full-length interview, and I remember thinking, wow, you know, the intense pressure that John Lennon would have been under. I mean, I suppose it was one of the first examples of a celebrity almost being cancelled, because certainly within the Bible Belt in America, they were not happy with what he said. It was misinterpreted, and he was basically accused of comparing himself with Jesus Christ, which I don't think it was really. Daft, really, if you ask me, but anyway, that's just my opinion. But this album, I remember thinking this was a real kind of eye-opener as to how crazy those mid-60s days were when they were touring. It's also got other things on. It's got Red Robinson talks about the effects of the Beatles' music on American and Canadian audiences and their appearance at the Empire Stadium in Vancouver in 1964. So again, really great LP, and gave me a real insight into the views of the Beatles, not just the music. We've got the White Album. Now, this particular copy of the White Album, I think I purchased this when I was about 12, 13, 14. Now, this particular version of the White Album, it's actually got embossed in it a serial number 0111843. Now, the most expensive copy of the White Album was number 0000001, which was given to Ringo Starr. And eventually Ringo put it on sale, and I think it reached about $280,000. So that's the first off the factory line which Ringo had, and he sold. Now this one's slightly different to many that you'll find. It's an original. I think it's a mono version, and it's got it opens up as well, if you noticed. All the others, the other releases, open sideways. This opens from the top, and it's still got the original paper sleeves. So I'll just take this out. So here we go. They're a little bit delicate now, as I say. So here we've got the White Album. I'll just show you that so you can see the Apple logo there. And yeah, it's a while since I've played these, sorry, there you go, right way up. There's the reverse there. But yes, I do believe that it's in mono, which I always think the White Album sounds better in mono. In fact, I think a lot of the Beatles songs sound better in mono. They've got much more of a kind of really closed sound where you can, I'm probably not really describing it well. Like, for example, the Sgt. Pepper album, you can tend to hear more little bits on the mono version than you can on the stereo. I'd much prefer the mono mix to the stereo mix, but anyway, that's just my personal feeling. Okay then, so we've also got the photos that came with the album. So these are the original photos. I'm sure many of you will have seen these before, but these are the originals from this album. So this is an original 60s copy of the album. I've no idea what it's worth, so if anybody knows out there how much any of these records might be worth nowadays, I'd love to hear from you. I'm not going to sell because, frankly, they're my prized possessions, but I would be interested to know what their monetary value is nowadays, just out of interest. Here we go, and here is the famous White Album poster. There we go. So here we go. And I think, if I remember right, I think there was an interview with Paul McCartney where he says what the kind of reasoning behind this collage was to focus on the blank spaces in between. So I forget what you call it. Is it dead space or blank space? But it just, I always thought this collage was really cool. Probably copied by many bands since, because collages are so interesting. And a bit like the Sgt. Pepper cover, you can actually sit on a bus with it and just stare at it. So when you used to buy records or CDs, you could sit on your bus journey and just read the cover and look at all the little hidden Easter eggs that are within the cover, especially on the inner sleeve of the White Album. And this is the next record I'm going to show you, and this is, well, you can see why I bought it, because it just looks so fantastic. It's a double album, and it's obviously got pictured vinyl. So we've got, this is the Silver Beatles. So obviously we've got Paul, Pete Best, George and John. And the same on the back there, John, George, Paul, Pete Best. So these were taken during the Silver Beatles days. And what we've actually got here is the Decca recordings. So on record 1, we've got Like Dreamers Do, Money, Take Good Care of My Baby, Three Cool Cats, Sure to Fall. Then on side 2, we've got Love of the Loved, Memphis, Tennessee, Crying, Waiting, Hoping, Till There Was You, and Searching. Then on record 3, we've got a 1982 interview with Pete Best. Now, it's a while since I've listened to this, but I believe he does go into his relationship with the Beatles, and particularly John Lennon, who just passed away a year or two before. And then on record 3 side B, we've got 1964 and 1965 Beatle press conferences. So I'll just take one of these out of the sleeve. They are beautiful vinyls, I've got to say. If you're into collecting picture discs, then you can't go wrong with these. Really nice pictures there. Yeah, so obviously this was my first introduction to the Silver Beatles, or that Decca audition that they did in 1962, I think it was. And I remember first listening to these recordings, and I thought they were good, but there was just something missing there. And I think really it was the polish that George Martin and the staff at EMI brought to their recording. Under George Martin's tutelage, I think they really did, the sound just gelled. Yeah, still had a great sound here. In fact, some of the songs I've always been a fan of Three Cool Cats. 3 Cool Cats, George singing it in his strong Scouse accent. Love of the Loved, nice early Paul song. And is Hello Little Girl on here? I don't think it is actually. So, but yeah, it's worth getting hold of one of these if you can. I think there might be some, as I say, it's probably worth it for the Pete Best interview. And also there's 1 or 2 tracks released on here that weren't released on the Beatles Anthology 1. So if you ever want to get hold of one of these, it's called the Silver Beatles, and it was 1982 Backstage Records, Beverly Hill label. So again, another bootleg, but one that I'm really pleased that I bought. Again, I think I was about 13 or 14 when I bought it. So it's going back a few years. Next record. Now here we have, this is, I think it's a Russian version. I might be wrong. So if I am wrong, please correct me. Of A Hard Day's Night. And I don't know whether it's Russian. Maybe it's Czech or Russian. No, I think it's the Russian version. What's interesting about this is not only the kind of different cover, but it was the first time that I remember playing it and realising that it was recorded. This is the stereo mix. So it's one of those recordings where you listen to one speaker, you've got maybe the vocals and hand claps, and then on the other speaker you've got the drums and the bass and the guitars, which was it's not an ideal way to listen to any recording really, because you want to be able to listen to everything as a whole together. But what was good about it was that you could make your own karaoke version. So just unplug the right hand speaker and then you immediately got the instrumentals, just the guitars and the drums. So I remember like in my early teens sort of singing along to these and recording myself and using it as a karaoke version. So yeah, so this is basically a Hard Day's Night album. I think all the track listings are the same. Hard Day's Night, I Should Have Known Better, If I Fell, Happy Just to Dance With You, And I Love Her, Tell Me Why, Can't Buy Me Love. On the other side you've got Any Time At All, I'll Cry Instead, Things We Said Today, You Can't Do That, and I'll Be Back. So yeah, so this is, I think it's the Russian version, but if I'm incorrect then please let me know. So yeah, Beatles, Hard Day's Night. And next up we've got a bit of a naughty one. Here is John and Yoko's Two Virgins. Now again, the reason that I got this, I just saw it in a shop, I hadn't seen it. I think this was the first time that I saw it. I think actually I might have been in my early 20s when I found this. And I always thought, if I ever find it, I'm going to buy it. And I forget how much it was. I don't think the price is on it, but I'm guessing maybe 20 or 30 quid. And as you can see, it's got the original paper bag sleeve Um, I'll take it out. I'll just show you the back because I don't want to get done for indecency showing John and Yoko's bits. But anyway, there's the reverse sleeve. So there they are with their bare bums showing to everybody. Yeah, just a really nice album to have as a Beatle collector. Yeah, I'm glad I bought it. I don't really play it that often, but I'm glad I've got it. So there we go, Two Virgins, released in 1968, late 68 I think, by John and Yoko. Paul McCartney's Press to Play. Now, a lot of people are now going to be saying, what on earth have you dug this one out for? Because it's not one of Paul's most coveted albums, but I love it. I'm here to say that I love this album, and I'll tell you the reason why. It's basically, again, there's an emotional link to it because I think I bought this when I was visiting my dad in London. I didn't really see my dad that often as a kid, so whenever I went down to London, it kind of brings back really good memories. And I remember seeing this in a record shop. My dad used to be a busker in London. He was an Irishman, he was a busker, and he used to play his guitar in the tube station. And there's the track here, Move Over Busker, and I remember my dad looking at it in the record shop, hey, look at this, Dominic, this kind of track called Move Over Busker. It must have, you know, kind of struck a chord with me old man. And it got a lot of flack at the time. In fact, even Paul's not too keen on it, which I know only too well after meeting him and chatting to him about it very briefly. But I love it. I just think there's some really great songs. Stranglehold, Footprints is a gorgeous tune. I really do think it is. I think the main problem is with it is that it's just that it's so 80s synth heavy. Everything's really synthesized, and you've got these gated drums, you know, that kind of real heavy 80s drum sound. But I still think there's some great songs. It Move Over Busker. I've always loved Press, and a lot of people hate it, but I just think, yeah, it's a catchy McCartney song. There he is on the London Underground again, which is probably another reason why I like the album, because it reminds me of going to visit my dad down in London. And also, look at this for a gatefold. You've got the stereo picture drawings that Paul drew. I think some really great artwork. I just don't think it deserves the flack that it gets. And even this front cover that was taken by, was it George Hurrell, I think. I'm just looking for the name here. He was an old photographer from the old Hollywood days who would photograph people like Ingrid Bergman and stuff like that. So beautiful front cover. I think mainly another reason why people find it a little bit hard to get hold of is the cover doesn't really give you an idea as to the type of songs that's going to be on it. You'd expect some kind of lush romantic orchestrations on this record, what with the, you know, the romantic black and white photo, but what you've got is a kind of mismatch of different sort of genres. You've got Stranglehold, which is there with its acoustic guitars and then saxophone. Then you've got Talk More Talk and Good Times Coming, Feel the Sun, which is very kind of 80s sounding. Footprints, I think it was actually the last song to be recorded for this album by Eric Stewart from 10cc and McCartney. And I think it's a beautiful song. Again, maybe a little bit too synth orientated. And Only Love Remains, which is a gorgeous song. I just love the album. Sorry folks, sorry Paul, but I think it's a good one even if you don't. Okay, that's Press to Play, 1986. Now again, I advise parental guidance here with this album. Another bootleg, and it is the Beatles. Not going to say the word because I'll get in trouble. Anyway, I just love this because I was about 12 or 13 when I bought it, and it's obviously just a Mickey take on the American version of the Help album. So it just makes me laugh. But again, the tracks that are on here were never, this is obviously pre anthology. So we've got alternate versions here of Help, Ticket to Ride. We've got That Means a Lot. Friend says that your love won't mean a lot. The kind of McCartney's trying to rewrite John's Ticket to Ride, which didn't really work, which is probably the reason that it never made it onto record until Anthology 2. I Got a Woman, Johnny Be Good. So obviously on here we've got some of the Honey Don't, which has got John on vocals. So we've got some of the recordings that would later find their way onto the Beatles BBC album, that Live at the BBC, Hippie Hippie Shake. And then we've got side 4, more Beatle interviews taken from their Australia and New Zealand tour. So there we go, that is the Beatles. Okay, now this one is a bit of a cheat. So if anybody looks at this and saying, wow, he's got the album, it's not. Here we go, the Beatles, Yesterday and Today, the famous Butcher cover. Now, as you can see, I've got it in a frame here. I'll leave it in its frame. It's not an original. It's actually a recent reissue. So this cover is not worth, basically a friend bought it for me, found it in a record shop in London. It cost 30 quid, so you know, it's he gave it to me for my birthday, and I'm really I just kept it in a frame because it just means a lot to me, because my friend bought it me. It's not worth anything monetarily. If this was an original and it was I think they call it, is it a phase 1 copy. Basically, I'll tell you the story of what happened with this album. As you can see, here are the Fab Four in 1966, and in America, Capitol Records would bring out their own versions of Beatle albums up until they got to Sgt. Pepper, where all the albums were of the same format and same track listing. As you can see, what they did here, we've got Yesterday, Dr. Robert, I'm Only Sleeping, And Your Bird Can Sing, We Can Work It Out, Day Tripper, Nowhere Man, What Goes On, Drive My Car, If I Needed Someone, and Act Naturally. So what they've actually done is taken songs from the Help album, Rubber Soul and Revolver, and bunged it on to this album here that Capitol released. Now the Beatles were always dead against this, because they'd sequence an album as to how they thought it should sound. So you've got, like on Rubber Soul, you've got Drive My Car, then you've got Norwegian Wood, then you've got You Won't See Me. And it was, all the songs came in the order that the Beatles knew would work, and they'd sound, each song would sound at its best. So they were really annoyed when Capitol Records would just, for want of a better word, butcher their albums and just take songs and then put them on their own album. And what happened with the cover, this cover was taken by photographer Bob Whittaker, and they wanted to, or Bob Whittaker certainly wanted to do something different, and I think they were tired of their sort of happy-go-lucky mop-top image of them smiling at the camera. Another photo. And I think Bob Whittaker said, right, we're going to do something really kind of obscene. And what they did was they got butcher's meat, and as you can see, they're all wearing butcher's smocks, and they've got dolls' heads, just to make it look really, just gory. In fact, apparently George Harrison hated the idea. He just wasn't up for it, but the other three were, and they brought this out. And what happened was, when Capitol said, we're going to put together this Yesterday and Today album, I think EMI sent them this picture, which was from the most recent photo shoot. And I think they printed, I don't know how many thousand copies it was, maybe 5,000 or 10,000. And one of the bosses at Capitol said, good God, we can't put these out. So what happened was they recalled all these albums, because they thought, no, this is far too obscene. Don't forget, you know, they'd already got into trouble with the Bible Belt over the remarks that John made about the Beatles and Christ. So bringing this out is really going to ruffle a few feathers. So they recalled the album and they put a picture of the Beatles, just sat on a trunk, I think it was, and they pasted it over the original cover, and then at a later date they just reprinted with this picture of them on the trunk. Now what happened in 1971, John was contacted by Dave Morell, who was a Beatles fan, and he had a copy of this album here. Now this is a bootleg that came out in the 1970s called The Beatles Yellow Matter Custard, previously unreleased studio material. Now this had got some of the recordings that they'd done on the BBC, for the BBC, and John Lennon was really keen to get his hands on a copy of this record. It's got, I'll just show you actually, it's got I Got a Woman, Glad All Over, I Just Don't Understand, Slow Down, Please Don't Ever Change, Please Don't Ever Change, A Shot of Rhythm and Blues, I'm Sure to Fall, Nothing Shaking But the Leaves on the Trees, Lonesome Tears in My Eyes, Everyone Wants Someone, I'm going to sit right down and cry, crying, waiting, hoping, To Know Her Is to Love Her, Bound by Love. So all these songs, I think I'm right in saying that they'll all appear on the Apple release from the mid-1990s of the Beatles at the BBC. But in the early 70s, these recordings were really hard to come by, and they found their way onto bootleg. John said, I want that bootleg. So Dave Morell said, well, can I do your swap? And John was like, well, yeah, sure, what do you want? And he said, have you got a copy of the Beatles Yesterday and Today? Which John happened to have. In fact, the actual album that John, the copy that was on his wall that he'd written on, that had a drawing, fetched recently £234,400 at auction. So it's the most expensive copy of the Beatles Yesterday and Today, and it was previously owned by John Lennon, to which he swapped for a copy of the bootleg Yellow Matter Custard. And then Dave Morell later on managed to get the autographs of Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr. He never managed to get George Harrison's autograph on it, but like I say, it did sell for £234,400. I think it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So very, very collectible album, this. But unfortunately, this isn't original. So don't try breaking into my house because it's not worth anything. And here we go. Here's another picture disc. Listen to this side B, this B-side, sorry. Now, put this in a frame just because it's just a really good picture. Taken from the Walls and Bridges sessions, photo sessions. This is a really good album, actually. It's an album of interview that John did in, I think, 1974, round about when Walls and Bridges was coming out. And I forget who the DJ was, but if you ever get a chance to get hold of this, or find the recordings maybe on YouTube, please listen to him. It's John at his finest. He just, sometimes you can listen to John Lennon in interviews and he's just scathing towards the Beatles, towards Paul, towards George, towards anybody. But sometimes you'd get him in interviews and he was just a darling. He'd reel off all these stories and he'd be absolutely on it. And you know what? If he lived longer, I'm sure that it'd have made it onto BBC Radio 2 or something, a bit like Bob Dylan has and Bruce Springsteen, because John was a perfect DJ. He just had the patter, it just rolled off his tongue. Anybody who, you know, remembers and loves John Lennon will just realise how his wit and his mind was so quick, and he was like a comedian. He was incredible. If you ever get your hands on this recording, it was I forget which radio station it was, but it was in America. I think he also talks about ELO, his love for ELO as well on here. but he also reads, he does stuff like reading out the weather. Today is going to be, today is muggy, followed by tugi, followed by waggy, thurgy, friggy. Tomorrow will be, you know, just all this nonsense sort of play that kind of goes over your head at first listen. And he'll just say, what's he doing tomorrow? Well, tomorrow's going to be the same as today, only different. Just comes out with real sort of apropos of nothing, non sequiturs, I suppose. It just absolutely, it's a real pleasure to listen to this. So subsequently I've put this onto cassette, and I think I've got copies of it on a computer as well. Just brilliant record. So fond memories of buying this record. Okay, moving to the final three. Now I'm going to show you 3 CDs now. This is the first. This is the Free as a Bird single, released at the tail end of 1995. Now, for how old was I? 18 at the time. So I've been listening to the Beatles since I was a kid, as long as I could remember. And then the news comes out that the Beatles are bringing out a new single. And I remember first hearing it on the radio when I was at college, and I've been dying to listen to it. And as soon as I heard the drum beat, because I could tell that it was a kind of Jeff Lynne produced song, and it was just like I was in heaven. And there was John's voice creeping in from the other side, and then there was Paul, and then there was George, just singing the whatever happened to the life that we once knew. And I think I must have played this at least 10 times every day at the time. I was just so bowled over with it. I know a lot of people weren't. They said, no, it doesn't sound anything like the Beatles. And I thought, well, it does. It's just recorded on modern technology with Jeff Lynne. And I absolutely adored this song. And we were also given a bit of a treat because obviously, like an EP, this single contained 4 songs. So you got Free as a Bird, I Saw Her Standing There, which was, I think, take 1 with Paul's energetic 1, 2, 3, 4 counting, then take 9 tapped on the front. Then we've got This Boy, where they all collapse in fits of laughter because I think George sings "That's Boy" and it just descends into complete mayhem. And then you've got his Christmas Time Is Here Again, which was on the 1967 Beatles Christmas flexi disc. So definitely worth owning as a Beatles collector, this CD, and fantastic song and brilliant video for Free as a Bird, yeah. Another CD here. Now we've got, this is a bit of a worn copy I've got now, but it came out in 2002, I think. This is George Harrison's Brainwashed. So this was his kind of swan song, and what an album. If anybody has not heard Brainwashed, please, I really encourage you to get it. It starts off with a track called Any Road, which is a lovely George song. Great for playing on the ukulele, by the way. Then we've got a very George song, Pisces Fish, Vatican Blues as well, which is a good old rocker. I mean, George's playing and his singing on this album's just, I mean, it really left on a high. Obviously, the album was only kind of half finished when George recorded it, and he left instructions to Darnie and to Jeff Lynne as to how he kind of wanted it building up. Now, apparently Jeff Lynne has said, you know, maybe that he took 1 or 2 liberties with it that George wouldn't have agreed with, and he wanted to make it a lot more barer. But Jeff Lynne said, no, this album deserves more, and it deserves more production. And I tend to agree. I think it sounds great. I think Darnie and Jeff Lynne did a brilliant job with getting this album together. And this, I mean, there's a version of Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea that he recorded with Joe Brown and Jules Holland as well. So that's on here. Stuck Inside a Cloud, which was the first single from the album. And the song at the end, Brainwashed, real great George Harrison rocker. So yeah, I really I recommend. Oh, wrong CD in there. I'll just show you the just show you the inner cover. So there you go. Must remember to put my right CDs in. And here we go. We've even got a booklet here with all the song lyrics. So here we go. I'll just turn around there. Always nice to get the lyrics. Great picture of George in his, presuming he'll be in his 50s there. What a great guy. God, 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 a voice cries in the wilderness. Yeah, so there we go. So that is George Harrison's Brainwashed. And now to my final CD. Well, it would be churlish of me not to include this one. I'll keep this in a frame and you will see why. This is a signed copy of Paul McCartney's 2013 release, New. And as you can see, there's some scribbling on it. If you look very carefully, it's actually got Paul McCartney's autograph to Dominic, to myself. And there I am, meeting Paul at HMV in Oxford Road in London on the 18th of October 2013. What it was, my friend's brother won a competition to meet Paul at the album signing. There's the gold wristband, which proves that you're a kind of VIP guest at this signing. And my friend's brother couldn't make it, unfortunately, so he asked my friend, and my friend asked me if I wanted to go, because there were 2 tickets. So naturally I said, yeah. So we both went on the train, got down there, it was a Friday, I think, if I remember right. And we went in this queue, and the feeling of walking past this whole packed Oxford Street HMV and getting to the queue where you know for sure that you're going to meet him. And it was just magic. And then, as if by magic, here comes the magician, Sir Paul McCartney, and he walks in through the room. I think the atmosphere was tangible. I think you could. I mean, I think the nearest thing that you would get to feel the electric in the atmosphere would have been to a Beatles concert back in the day. I mean, the mania was still just as strong, and there were so many different age groups there. There were people way younger than me that were there, and people way older than me. So it just shows how Paul is totally, and the Beatles, totally cross-generational. Anyway, my friend went up, and just before my friend went up, a girl, a really attractive girl, had just done a handstand right in front of Paul, and he just sat there stood there kind of not knowing where to look, with a bit of a grin on his face. Anyway, my mate went up to him and said, I don't have to do that, do I? I don't have to do a handstand. And he said, no, you don't need to do that. And then he shook my mate's hand, and my mate said, can I just ask you how many hours you used to play in Hamburg? He said, yeah, about 12-hour sets. And my mate said, wow, that must have made you really tight. And Paul said, yeah, it did. Yeah, it did make us tight. Yeah. And it was interesting because my mate said he was looking into Paul's eyes, and Paul was recollecting in his mind all these memories of playing in Hamburg and the sets that they did. And he was talking to the actual man. Incredible. So next up was my turn. Well, I like to think I don't get starstruck, but I've got to be honest, I totally did. As you can see, I was wearing a very sort of 60s black long Beatles coat. I actually bought that coat from a shop in Liverpool called Beatwear. And I was wearing my Beatle boots and 60s paisley cravat. And I just looked at Paul. It's just weird. Basically, Paul was as near as I am to this camera now. And I said, all right there, Paul. And he said, he looked me up and down because he could see what I was wearing, all the 60s gear. He said, very finely suited. I said, oh, thank you. I thought, being given sartorial praise by Paul McCartney. Then I said, I love your new album. I've just been listening to Press to Play It, and it reminds me of that. I don't know why I said that, because this album sounds nothing like Press to Play, really. And just for a moment, Paul kind of looked at me and he just went, that's a very unusual choice of comparison. And I said, oh no, but it just sounds so new. And I could tell by this time I was really losing the plot. So I thought, come on, Dom, bring yourself together. Pull yourself together now. This is Sir Paul McCartney. Anyway, I said, I love all your stuff. It's just brilliant. It sounds great. Anyway, he said, oh, cheers, man. So he said, who am I signing this to? And I said, to Dominic. And I thought, he's writing my name. There we go, signed off. Then went off, and then my mate, who'd previously been up, was trying to take a photo of me. My mate's hands were like jelly. So who got hold of the camera? But John Hamill, Paul McCartney's kind of assistant, who's been an assistant for donkey's years, and he was a really lovely bloke, John Hamill. So he tried taking the photo, and I'd just started walking away, so he went, oh! He came out with an expletive, because I'd just started moving just as he was about to take the photo. But anyways, luck would have it, somebody was in the audience and actually managed, I don't know, I found this on the internet, somebody managed to get a photo of me with Paul. So, as you can imagine, this is my prized possession that I keep under lock and key. So yeah, New by Paul McCartney, 2013, signed DVD. Well, thanks very much for joining me for this look through my vinyl and CD collection of Beatles memories. And don't forget, if there are any songs that have appeared on these albums that you'd like me to teach you on the ukulele, just let me know and I'll put together a tutorial for you. Take care for now, and all the best.